The following content is provided by MIT OpenCourseWare under a Creative Commons license. Additional information about our license and MIT OpenCourseWare in general is available at ocw.mit.edu.
When I was doing my, when I started my doctoral dissertation, I went in to visit my advisor, and I said, he laid out the problem because it was on a grant. And there was some leeway, a lot of leeway. And it was on submarines. I think I gave you a little thing about that. And so I'd heard a lot of stories about doing dissertations. Particularly, there was a guy who was in the department who had been around for 10 years. You know. So I said, when will I finish this dissertation? And I expected him to say when I got the solution to this problem. He didn't say that. He said, well, right now, I'm the teacher and you're the student. He said, you'll know when you're going to finish the dissertation, when you become the teacher and I become the student. In other words, what he was really saying was when he volunteered to become the student, I wasn't going to make, no, when he just sat back, and that day came, it came all in one moment, because I had gotten all of these equations, but I needed one more equation because I had an extra constraint. And he didn't know where to go with that, get that equation. And he had told me where he thought it came from. And I told him I thought it came from someplace else. And so what I did was something that graduate students don't normally do. I did it both ways. Did it his way, and I did it so-called my way. And when I went back, I showed him his way and was getting all tangled up. It looked like it might lead to some place, but it just didn't know. It wasn't. It just got tangled up with a lot of concerns. And then he said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "But I've got another suggestion." So I made this assumption, and then he said, "Well, are we going to live with an assumption, or can you prove that this is true?" I said, "I can prove it. I used geometry to prove it." So when I did that, his whole tone of voice changed. Instead of talking to me about what I should be doing, he asked me, what should we be doing? And I walked out of there, and I said, I got my dissertation. Well, it took another year, before it was all done. But that might have been in March. It was done in November. At that moment, I knew. So I'd like to use some of that with the class. I want y'all to turn me around. I know next week is the final week of class, but that's good practice, isn't it? Yeah. Already. Yeah.
Well, I'd be interested in hearing, sort of in preparation for Thursday.
Yeah.
More about your sort of scholarly path to narrative ethics.
Yes.
Why you ended up there instead of
Okay.
focusing on hypothetical or physical ethics.
Right. Good.
That sort of background piece that I.
Okay. That has that's a story that I can tell. I'm just trying to think of where to start so I don't take up the whole class period. I want to make 5 minutes out of it, right? Maybe 10 at the most. The whole thing started. I don't know where the whole thing started, but a good place to start is with this man named Joseph Campbell. And I saw him on the Bill Moyers program. Bill Moyers had this program. I forgot the name of it, but he'd interview these people that had something interesting to say. Bill Moyers background is in divinity. I don't know if he's ever been ordained, but his doctorate is in divinity. So he has an appreciation for philosophy, a deep knowledge of it, and there is an orientation to religion that he had, that seemed to have, that fit in with Joseph Campbell, and that was the notion of allegorical theology. And that is that what you learn is told in a story, and somehow or another your life story or the big events in your life will be metaphors of one of those stories. Okay. Now, they use the same thing in law, but they call it by a different name. They call it what do they call it? Precedence. So when you have a legal case, a case that you want to prosecute or defend, you go into case histories and you find one that looks like this particular case. And then you say, well, what did the judge, how did the lawyers argue the case, and what did the judge decide would be, when found guilty, the punishment? Okay. And that's a very interesting question for lawyers. You'll remember in the Scopes trial, however, well, I'm going to talk about the Scopes trial for about 20 seconds, but I'm going to talk about it from the movie, Inherit the Wind, not from the newspapers and from the law courts. In the movie, the Scopes was found guilty, but then the judge said he fined him $100. I hope you understand me when I say I fell in love with Joseph Campbell, not just with what he was saying, but the way he said it and all these figures and everything. And then I went out and read. I got the transcript of the TV program. Then I went out and read 4 of his books. And then over time, I got some videotapes, some videos of his lectures. Many of his lectures have been put on videotape. So I got about 2 hours of that, and sat down with my stepson over that, because I was trying to help him with one of his problems, and I used mythology. I went out and wrote a paper on him. The paper called about not the concrete sumo. The one about the Oberlin horse, I wrote that for him. I said, this is going to solve your problem. It didn't. But I think what you'll see in this life is that some people are, for example, scientists 8 hours a day. After that, science doesn't mean anything to them. Don't get it wrong. They may be the best. Some of them may be very talented at what they do. But I'm what they call a professor 24 hours a day. I solve the deepest problems in my life by going to the library. Okay. So I got started with this whole thing about, to answer your question, with Joseph Campbell. That was natural to me because I came up in a storytelling family. Turn off the TV. Notice I said the TV. There was only one. We got our first television in 1948. We were only 2 people. There were only 2 families in Hickory, North Carolina that had a television. My dad went out and got one. Kids used to come over. The television wasn't on, but an hour a day. Came on like 4 o'clock, was off at 5. The news was 5 minutes. A TV program, a drama, was 15 minutes. Kids used to come over Saturday mornings to watch the television. My mother would serve popcorn. Yeah, that was down in Hickory, North Carolina in 1948. We'd turn off, but even later in life, we'd turn off the television. And my parents would have relatives or friends over, and they get to talking about something and telling. And then when they got into the storytelling mode, they let me and my little brother come out, and we sit on the floor and we listen to them. So I came out into a storytelling mode in the first place. So telling story. So the end of this, your question is that I gave a paper at a conference, and my thoughts were, respected to some extent, enjoyed to some extent, not a whole lot. What I brought to the table was that I was one of the few engineers in the room when they were talking engineering ethics. Better stated, I was one of the few engineers who was a practicing academic with a doctorate in engineering. A lot of them were practicing engineers, but I was one of the few. So when I gave talks, people were nice. One day I gave a talk and I told this concrete sumo story, and the whole place went right through the ceiling. Published it and got on what they call a lecture circuit. And I was giving lectures around the country. I wasn't making a lot of money. Some people, who was it? Colin Powell. Didn't he charge something like $20,000 for a lecture? I was getting $50. But they would pay my expenses. So I went around and I went on the circuit with it. And the story thing just hit. So I said, there it is. So on Thursday, now, as it turns out, the human factor has set in. Cynthia Winston has taken a hospital condition. Won't be able to make it. I will do my best to cover what she was going to cover. When I say do my best, I am not going to take, we were going to have 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. Now we're going to have 30 minutes and 30 minutes, but I'll take out 10 minutes, give an overview of what she was going to talk about. I have some slides that I really got from another person. I'll have to get his permission to put them up. But I'll tell you what they are. You need to know. This is extraordinary. I'll tell you who he is and where he can be contacted. His last name is Casebeer, one word, Casebeer. He holds the rank of major in the United States Air Force. And my last count was that he was on the faculty at the Air Force Academy. That's what I'm going to try to reach him tonight. I met him here when I gave my first talk in ESD. He was there. And he was there because he was a visiting professor up at Harvard doing, okay, you ready for this? You ready for this? He was doing empirical work on the brain, not the mind, on the brain when it processes stories. And he's got these slides. I've got them right there on my computer today, but I do not feel comfortable even showing them to one other person because I don't know if he's published them yet. Not that I can do anything with them, but they've got these scans of the brain, and they show the parts of the brain that are active during storytelling. Yeah, and his area is ethics. He's trying to relate the stories to ethics. I think his doctorate is in ethics. Or no, I have to find out. But hopefully I'll have enough to say. Hopefully I'll get permission from him tonight. Hopefully I'll have enough to say in plain language. I will not attempt to be a psychologist. But I don't know how he's gotten into the empirical work, probably with collaborators. But his background is in ethics, and it's all empirical. It's incredible, this stuff that he's doing. So this business of storytelling has caught on, and I think it caught on because something not totally irrelevant. I think, well, what the argument I make, I do a historical analysis of all this. And what I say is that the interest really got started with Noam Chomsky. When Noam Chomsky said that the brain is wired for language structures. That is, that no matter what country you're born in, no matter what period of human development you were born in after we became Homo sapiens sapiens, that the brain was wired for the same language, had the same language structures. You may learn different languages, but the thing that gets the appeal in most people's minds about it, I think, the broad appeal, is that if you really want to teach a child a person a new language, teach them before they're something like 6 years old, they will absorb it like a sponge. They're not smarter, but those structures are not cluttered, and they can learn more than one language. I don't understand how that goes, but Noam Chomsky started all this stuff off, and so then a man by the name of Bruner, I think it's B-R-U-E. N-E-R. I can check that spelling for you. I got it on my computer. Came along and said something that had a lot of philosophical import. And that was, he made a distinction between understanding and meaning. So you can understand what a concept says, but you don't get the meaning until the concept is put into a story. That's the argument, and I buy the argument. Okay. So the notion of storytelling, and as I said, storytelling and ethics goes back to Plato. All right. But it was lost because it got lost in religion over the United States. And it also got lost because now I'm going to make a statement that I have argued before but never written on and never argued in a formal setting. Okay, so but I can talk to you about what I think. You can criticize. I think that perhaps the main reason it got lost is that it got lost in Western educational systems. Because you don't have a rigorous there is a rigorous method to test a good story from a bad one, but not instantaneously. Not like you can put it on a test and I can say yes or no. You gotta, it works itself over time. And if you go to a drama class, the professor in there will make judgments. This story is not any good. That story is a wonderful story. Students don't like it. Why isn't this a good story? I've got all of the pieces in it that this kid's got. 2 years later, your story gets a Pulitzer. The professor was wrong. Got nothing to do with anything. Okay, that's a story. That's a teaching. That's a teaching part of a teaching culture that's lost. Grade it. To grade it right on the spot. And go ahead. No. The students complain to the teachers.
And that's why it was lost?
I think in recent times, since the 60s.
Students have demanded
I would put it even more precisely. I'm going to say that what happened is that students wanted objective measures of their work. They don't want subjective measures.
Right. I guess you talked about that.
I did. Yeah.
But I don't discount the importance of subjective measures, but objective measures on communication, I think, are important.
Well, what I think. Go ahead. No, I cut across you because I got excited. Sorry.
It seems like you're implying that the loss of this teacher saying good, bad, no reason you're saying that's a shame, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a bad thing.
what works is when you know the professor. And when the professor says this is no good, you now know that in that professor's, I don't want to say personality, but I want to say in that professor's framework of understanding the world, that's a good judgment about my work. Somebody else, some other professor would say something different. Now I've learned how the world operates. Because somebody's going to buy my product, somebody else isn't. Yeah. Yes. They call it mythology. When it, yeah, I think that the universal things work themselves out over generations. Frankly, I don't think it takes time to prove it per se. I think what you have to see is that over space and time, and the time measured in terms of generations, that the kinds of things that bother some generations and cause them to criticize this piece won't bother the next generation. But a mythology is going to get to every generation. Okay. So in one generation, the Greeks don't like the Persians, and here comes a piece of work out of Persia, you know. Well, somehow or another, one piece gets the Greeks. It came out of Persia, but it gets to them. Then the Greeks produce 10 generations, and the 10th generation doesn't care anything about Persian problems. It gets to them too, you know. So I think that's what. There's another art form that's like that. More precisely, is poetry. Poetry, and it doesn't have to be rhyming poetry. Lucretius's Nature of the Universe was a point. The whole thing. What about the Quran? Is it a poem? The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam was a poem. Yeah. I wouldn't know because the only parts of the only Quran that I know that I have read was in English. Right. But I tell you, an illuminating, pleasurable experience I had. Sitting down, and this guy was sitting down with three people. One of them was from Italy. And this friend of mine walked in. I introduced him to this lady, and said she was from Italy. And this guy says that once a year for the past 20, 30 years, he has gone to Italy to attend La Scala because he loves opera. He saves, and that's what he does. That's his personal thing. And so he sat there and read Dante's inscription over the. He recited in Italian Dante's inscription over the gates of hell. I didn't understand a word. I thought that thing was the most beautiful thing I ever heard. And I've got these books that I got a few years ago. I saw them in the bookstore. I saw the first one in the bookstore maybe 5 years ago, and I got the second one a couple of months ago, Volume 1, Volume 2 of Dante's Inferno. What they do is each page, when you open the book, the right-hand page is written in English. The left-hand page is written in Italian. And he's got all of the lines numbered so you can follow them. And you look over there, and because they use the same alphabet, you could see the rhyming. And you can call the words. You can read it. You can't. I can't understand it, but I can certainly read the words. Right? And I sit there and listen, but I say, "Oh, it's beautiful." Just and it gets into the brain, so you can remember it. That's very important. Another thing is now what people have said that it's the beginnings of a scientific perspective that will probably work itself out in a few years. And it's got to do with this whole business of what called prenatal care. And it is apparently Mozart's mother, when she was pregnant with him, used to sit down with Mozart's father, who was a musician, and he would play to the unborn baby. And then up comes Mozart. Okay, so but there's some strong evidence that music and storytelling has some effect on the unborn. It's positive. It's the rhythm of it. So you asked me how did I get involved in the storytelling? That's my long story. That's about a third of it. But yeah, Joseph Campbell is starting. Okay. I had one other experience that I want to share with you. About 10 years ago, make it 10 years ago, make it 12 or 15 years ago, I can't remember. The American Association of Engineering Societies, AAES, got some visitors. I'll tell you when it was. Okay, when did the Berlin Wall come down? It was a year after that.
89.
Okay. All right, it was a...
The USSR broke up.
Yep, keep going.
Berlin Wall came down. And I think one was in 89 and one was in 19.
Oh.
Which came first?
The wall.
The wall came down first, so 89.
Let's try 92. It was a year after. The AAS got these visitors from, which was no longer the Soviet Union, from Russia. And they were philosophers. And they were visiting the United States and going around, and they wanted to talk with the ethics committees of the various engineering societies. And so I was invited to come down and meet with them when they came to AAES. I had fallen out of favor with them, but somehow got partially back. And it was a group of about 6 professors and then some others who were with them. And there was an old person with them. And there was this woman who I hesitate to say, her age is important. She was in her early 30s, but she spoke English very fluent. That's important. The old man didn't say anything. Okay. Very old. He was very, he looked like a sage, very impressive looking man. And it was clear somehow when they began to talk Russian among themselves that he was the leader. Okay. So they opened up the session and said, one person said that the reason that they had going on this tour is that it has become very clear that Western culture is going to penetrate Russia. But they don't want the decadence to come along with it. Okay. And so they want to understand it very well and go back and craft and make sure that their universities, quote unquote, remain. I tell you what's too strong a word, pure. Find a word for me. They want to, in other words, there's a price to pay for everything. They didn't want to pay a big price for Western ethics. the self-interested part that leads a person to be what they call decadent.
So they wanted the university to remain like aesthetic, like for self-denial.
All right. I guess what I mean is that if you were sitting in that room, you'd get a different meaning than I got. So I want you to have enough freedom to say that even if you were there, you would interpret what you said maybe a little bit differently. But we had these discussions, and so the old man is sitting there, not saying anything, sitting back very wise. Occasionally, one of the others would come back and say something to him in Russian. He would say something back, then they would nod their heads and come back to the discussion. And at about 4/5 of the way through the discussion, I don't know what it was that I said. That man leaned across the table and started speaking in English. And all of the Americans sitting around there thinking that he couldn't speak any English. And he started speaking in English. And he answered, I had put a question to them. And he answered the question by telling a story. So I've talked to other people since then, and there seems to be a cultural trait outside of the U.S. where old people are given the privilege of answering questions and giving advice by telling a little story. You know, tell you directly. And you're supposed to think about that and carry that with you where you go. So this is a globalizing world, and my instincts tell me that if you develop this allegorical technique, that you'll have a lot of listeners when you get out of here. So, Thursday. Oh, we were still on Thursday, right. So Winston won't be here. I'll do something. Gabata-Gazin is supposed to arrive at 1 o'clock. He's got somebody picking him up. I'll be talking to him in my office probably about 2 or 3. And Wednesday, he and I will be crafting out, among other things, Thursday together. We agree on the general, or what generally, we talked about it in general. But he's mainly here so that we can work on our grant. We can work on that on Wednesday. On Thursday at, let's say, 10, maybe a few minutes, 9:45, a few minutes before, you're all invited to come to my office. There is a style of treating visitors that I practice. It used to be a big thing at Howard. I've seen it in other places. And that is, when you get a speaker to come to your class, you get together with the person, or when the speaker's giving a talk to your department or whatever, you get together with the person a little bit beforehand. And some of the people that are going to be there are there beforehand. You kind of talk, pass some wine around. I'm not authorized to have wine at E38, but not in here. But and then you walk over together. Okay, so that's what we're going to do, and you all are invited. Around 10-ish. We're both going to be using PowerPoint, so even though that's going to be pushing it, I want to get here just as this class is over to plug in everything. Then I will open the class up. I don't know how many people are going to be here. I don't know. Tony just said that they've got posters all over the university about this thing, all over the institute. And I know it went out on the web, MIT web. I only got, But since I'm already on open courseware, of course, we just have to tell people what you're doing in case they want to say something. The only person I know who know for sure, only one person called back, said that was coming, is a professor, a senior professor actually, over in brain and cognitive sciences. So I will ask, I invited him to come to my office early. And if he does, I'll ask him if he'd be willing to stand by during the Q&A period for anything on this business. He knows Cynthia Winston personally. So he was really coming to see her. And then I told him that she wouldn't be coming. He said he would come anyway. All right. His name is Alan Hine. Then when we come in, I will call class to order and say what we're going to do. That we've got a panel. We've got 3 presentations, 2 panelists. One is not able to be with us, so one panelist will give some introductory remarks to her presentation, and then I'll say something about the structure. That we have 2 panelists, and we have a panel chair. We have a rapporteur who are students in the class. Then I will introduce the panel chair, and I will sit down. Now, and we're going to have PowerPoint. So let's decide now on how we're going to sit. Normally, the panelists face the audience, but everybody's going to want to see the screen. So maybe we should. How do you think we should do this?
Do you want to sit while you speak, or will you stand?
I want to stand while I speak, but when I'm not speaking, I want to sit and see the screen.
Yeah. So I mean, you guys could just sit. Yeah, all 4 of us could sit in the front row.
And look right here at the screen. Okay. Okay, that will work. I just have one actual concern. Maybe I should start it up at the end of class. If I got time, I'll put it. I have one slide. I have 3 slides where my picture is not on the PowerPoint as an insert. It is the background. Okay, so it's the whole thing. And I wonder if, I tried this once before in here. You couldn't see it too good unless you sat back. But I can't think of a better way to do it than to have it as background. Why don't we do this? The chair, depending on how many people are here, we'll have to make an ad hoc decision as to how to handle it if it doesn't come up. Then the chair. Then I am going to talk. I'm going to give 10 minutes on narrative psychology.
So before that, you want the panel chair to introduce?
Well, now how does the panel chair want to do it? Okay, the panel chair will say this. The title of this panel is Narrative Ethics, and we're pleased to have 3 presentations and 2 speakers. And then the panel chair will say, our first speaker couldn't make it with us today. Don't say couldn't be here today with us today. That sounds like she was buried. I'm just kidding about that. But what's normal? You've been to these conferences. What do people normally say? Our first panelist, Dr. Cynthia Winston, sends her apologies. She couldn't be here with us today. She has sent down some things for us to talk about. And Dr. Broome will give a 10-minute presentation. We are honored to have Professor Hine here from Brain and Cognitive Sciences here at MIT, who's agreed to take on some questions and even make some comments during the Q&A period. Okay. And so I'll get up and do 10 minutes. Hopefully I'll have some slides. Then I sit down, okay, and then on narrative psychology. Then you will introduce Dr. Gabata-Gazin. Now that requires some effort, okay. His name is Nigerian, G.B. Gaba. De Gazin. B.A. Gabata-Gazin. So what? Gabata-Gazin. Okay. And in the 10, 20 minutes that we have together before we come over, it's a good time to say, well, how would you like to be introduced? Okay. Many times a person will have with them a little 3x5 card and have 2 lines on there for you to use. And then he'll get up and do his piece. He will have a PowerPoint presentation, which is unusual for philosophers. Be prepared for this. I've seen him give 2 outstanding talks. 2 talks, and both of them were outstanding. Okay. But he did something that engineers never do. 30% of the time, philosophers will do it. That is, read the whole thing. And the reason is that their use of the English language is so precise that they cannot memorize the whole thing. And if they're talking leisurely, get one thing wrong, another philosopher will pick it up and crack the whip on them later. And so they'll read it. And every time I've seen an engineer do that, and I've seen it happen a couple of times, the whole audience went dead to sleep. But philosophers will sit there and they'll listen very carefully to every word. So I don't know what he's going to do with this PowerPoint. But he will cover 2 things. He will cover, it will be on cross-cultural ethics. That's pretty much the title. And he will also talk something about something we did not want to discuss in this class as the major topic, which is bioethics. But I've said before, the best way to understand what a thing is to also understand what it is not. Remember the monks in the yellow monastery. They didn't even know what yellow was until they saw what it was not. Okay, so he'll talk a little bit about bioethics. I don't know what he's going to say, but I know what he said before, and I know what his main thrust is, and that is that ethics can be universalized over all cultures and at all points in time. But the way people express ethics differs greatly over all cultures and over all periods of time. And he's got examples. Joseph Campbell does that too. So that's what I think is going to be, I would anticipate is what he's going to do. And we're going to meet this afternoon and tomorrow, and I would not presume, it would not even come into my mind to tell him what to talk about. He's going to talk about what he wants. Okay. Then he'll sit down. Maybe a few burning questions. Then I'll get up, and the title of my presentation is The Narrative in Engineering Ethics. Now, I want to spend a few minutes today before we get out of here, depending on what y'all want to talk about, on what I want to say on Thursday, because I don't want you to have to listen too closely to what I have to say. I want you to be thinking about, the repertoire kind of a stuff and how you're going to ask questions, Q&A. So I also want to test it on you. Get some feedback. But I'd like for you to really have your brains on what Kabbalah gazing has to say. Because you've been hearing me all year, semester long. And then we'll have the Q&A. Q&A is not exactly what I ever had. People can make comments, too. They don't have to phrase them as questions. But once they've made a comment, then the panelists can make a comment on their comment. Right. Now, and then once that's over, then you thank everybody for coming. And technically, you're supposed to give the class back to me. But I don't know if there are 30 people in here and they applaud, for 5 seconds, then the class is over. I won't be able to say anything. People are walking out and talking. But I have the responsibility for the class. I will delegate my authority. Okay.
Did you want the repertoire?
I'm sorry, the repertoire. I forgot about the repertoire. The repertoire comes up and before the Q&A, because the repertoire would be subject to Q&A. And the repertoire will spend 5 minutes or so talking about what each person said. And sort of inspiring the audience to ask certain questions.
Okay, so ideally, Professor Broome, do you want questions or comments in between Dr. Rodriguez and yourself? No, you were willing to say everything for the day.
I would like for it to be burning questions.
Okay.
So if you got something that can't wait, ask it, but otherwise save it. All right. Now, let's talk a little bit about skills management and in a scholarly forum. Okay. One day I was chairing a panel at a conference at Johns Hopkins. Forgot what the topic was on. One of the speakers was Dr. Rachel Hollander, who just retired this past, I think, February. Well, at least put it this way. We gave her a retirement party at the AAAS meeting in February. And had a panel session at the conference for her. And there was standing room only in there. She was head of the Ethics and Values program and had been there like 30 years. Okay. And it was a good attendance in there. President Rensselaer came in there. And I told one story that I had with her, this retirement. So we were sort of like roasting her. And that was the time when I was doing this thing over at Hopkins. And y'all ever heard of student pugwash? Well, it was an international conference of student pugwash. And we were in a large room. And up in the balcony, they had, all of this equipment and people up there. That's important, okay? And just before the panel started, like within a minute, the organizers of the conference literally ran up on the stage and corralled me and Rachel and said that they used two words, infiltrated and attacked. Attacked. They said the audience had been infiltrated by what they called Lyndon LaRouche's. That's a legitimate organization in the United States, mainly of young people. Lyndon LaRouche himself is my age. But I don't know. Let's put it this way. My best way of describing that organization is that they have left-wing positions, but right-wing tactics. They'll come in and take over your program. And they have a taste for violence. Look it up on the web. LaRouche. Or you heard of them?
Yeah, they stand on
Handing out leaflets? Okay.
I didn't realize that they went to talk.
Well, they...
In the question and answer period, I'm assuming.
Yes. No, they'll interrupt you while you're at it.
Oh, really?
If you say something that's out of line from their program, they'll interrupt you while you're at it and take over your program. Okay. So I said, well, there's only two things we can do. Number one, this is a scholarly public program. We cannot forbid anybody from speaking. Okay. But as chair, I can... I have the parliamentary powers to keep anybody from dominating the program, and if they try to dominate the program, I'll make it a case where they have to get violent with me to stop me, and if they get violent with me, they'll be on. I pointed up there with all of those cameras. I said, well, and that's what I did. I announced it right. I said, now if anybody does not want to respect my parliamentary powers, then it will be a matter where you have to bring violence to the stage, and you will be on tape, and we will tape you right down to the Baltimore Sun and the Washington Post. And well, all I'm saying is that I've seen scholarship at its best. I've seen it at its worst. I've seen it in cases like this one, which was not necessarily the best, but certainly could have been the worst and was avoided. It turned out to be all right. They had got up and said what they had to say, but they didn't try to be belligerent over the thing. So I'm saying that when you're chairing a scholarly session, attending and chairing a scholarly session, that everything is not routine all the time, everywhere. And that your first obligation is to good scholarship. Okay. Anything else on that? So both of you want to be chairs, and then both want to be rapporteurs?
We're both going to give like a 2.5-minute response instead of one of us giving a 5-minute response.
All right.
Well, we just got to be less pressure if you know what I mean. Like if I said
Yeah.
both feel free to.
Okay. Okay. And what about chairing it? We're going to have two chairs?
I'm more than happy to share it, but
Well, we could do, like, I could introduce Dr. Delegation, and you could do everything else.
All right. Okay. All right. So then I'll turn over the conference to you, and you manage it from there, and then turn it. If the flow is right, you give it back to me at the end of class. If people are walking out, no point. So I would imagine, I think we can expect a minimum of 5 people. Who knows, with all of this advertising, what the walk-ins might be. So be prepared for the whole place to be filled up. Be prepared for I don't know. I have figured about 5 or 6, 7 people. And that'd be about right for us. Okay. Can we, unless you have some other issues, I want to go back to vocabulary building. Actually, not vocabulary building, vocabulary strengthening. You already have these words and terms. Here's some words and terms that I would like to cover today, in addition to some others. All right. And one of them is learned discipline. What do you mean when you say mathematics is a learned discipline? What do you say? What do you mean when you say carpentry is not a learned discipline? What do you mean by that? Is engineering a learned discipline? Is ESD a learned discipline? Is education a learned discipline? Itself, not what we do. What does it mean? What does it mean to engage 2 learned disciplines? We did go through that a little bit, and I'm going to go through it on Thursday. But I really would like to know what does it mean to say that ethics is a learned discipline? What does it mean to say that engineering is a learned discipline? Can you prove that engineering, in fact, is a learned discipline? Or does it get all of its first principles from science and mathematics? That's a question that's debated.
Wait, what was that last part you just added? It seems like you made a contrast between engineering. If it's not a learned discipline, that's because it gets all of its first principles from science.
Well, we have to define what we mean by learned discipline first.
Okay.
All right, so we'll do that. I hope. Yeah, I mean, that's why I laid that one down first. What is a profession? That's another question. What is a profession? And here's a good one for you. What does it mean to profess? And after you've got what it means to profess, then tell me what a professor is. One who professes? That's what it used to mean. Some other terms are going to come out. Oh, I got a term for you. I was just looking at this this morning. Didn't finish it. What does the word safety mean? What does the word risk mean? Here's another word. We talked about responsibility, authority, and accountability. What about liability? Going back to risk, what does the term risk assessment mean? what does it mean? What does acceptable risk mean? What is it? What is an acceptable risk? And what does the term risk perception mean? It usually means willingness to take the risk. Okay. Why don't we go through some of these terms and words and terms? Start with the first one. Learn a discipline. And let's have a discussion first. I have definitions for these terms and words. But I'd like to have your thoughts and feelings about these terms and words. We can go back like we did to the web or at a dictionary anytime. All classes are open for revision of anything that we have covered before or anything that I have said before. So,
maybe we could start with learning discipline as a body of knowledge and skills with certain requirements, certain criteria. A body of knowledge and skills such that there are both novices and experts. In other words, not everyone just receives the same level of education. There's a pathway from being a novice to an expert. And that helps.
feel free.
You want to do it, right?
I don't know what I want you to do with. I want you to feel free.
Well, let's find something.
Well, you put down some words. Let me. Now I'm going to ask. Well, you said what learn the discipline is.
Well, I started the definition.
Yeah.
I mean, sure.
Is that definition going to help us decide what is not a learner discipline? Or is everything going to qualify if it has? Okay, go ahead.
I'm thinking about it with the characteristics. And then there's a list of characteristics that make something learn a discipline. And then what you were suggesting is that without the characteristics,
Okay.
so, I mean, then we could satisfy both saying what it is and what's not. That would be one way to structure it.
Okay. Now, what I like about this is she's got a structured approach. Okay. Well, first of all, now, let's interrogate this. I use the word interrogate. That's what I. No. Let's just interrogate everything that's up there. All right. And I'm using the word interrogate because I want to just tell you that what I come up with in the end that I spent a lot of time on is not necessarily better than what anybody else has, but it fits into my book. Okay. The point that I want to make is that it's going to look a whole lot like this. So when I interrogate it, not trying to tear it down, all right? But let's interrogate it so that we can understand it better. All right? Okay.
So I'm pretty comfortable with the body of knowledge.
All right.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. Yeah, maybe that's a good place to start.
Wait a minute.
I don't know about abilities, but I'm pretty comfortable with it. So there's knowledge, and then there's different abilities associated with that knowledge.
Yeah,
Like
like
you
you
can comprehend, you can evaluate, you can assess, you can synthesize, you can do taxonomy. So just, but maybe you're right. Maybe the learner, maybe the discipline is just the knowledge, and then the ability associated with that knowledge is something else outside of it.
Well, first of all, what a dictionary is going to say, I think a dictionary and many encyclopedias are going to base it, start off with this term body of knowledge. Well, that's the one I want to penetrate. Okay. We've studied ethics all this semester. Did we produce any knowledge? Is ethics about the production of knowledge? Does ethics have any knowledge in it that you can't get from someplace else, like, for example, science? That's a hard question.
It has, I mean, to be a scholar of ethics, it requires knowledge of what other people have said about ethics.
All right. Now, what I want you to do is somewhere above the term body of knowledge, maybe with an arrow, I want you to write this man's name. His name is Bernard Gert, G-E-R-T. And he is at why is this university escaping my mind? In New Hampshire. New Hampshire? Yeah. What university? Dartmouth. He's at Dartmouth. Unless he's retired. You know, all of my buddies are gone now. Bernard Gert wrote a book called, he's a philosopher and an ethicist. He wrote a book called Moral Knowledge. Okay. But he has a view that I don't think is widely shared, even though his view is as defensible as anybody else's. Because we want to talk about ethics being having more to do with value judgments than knowledge.
Yeah, I guess that's why I added abilities, because there's, in learning discipline,
Okay.
there's information you need to have,
Right.
and then there's something that you do with that information. And that's the way I think of ethics. Like, I've needed to understand better vocabulary and like techniques and strategies for looking at a dilemma, and then apply those techniques to make value judgments, to say what's permissible and what's.
Okay. Now, most people, I think, when we begin to talk about our learner discipline, when I say most people, most scientists, certainly including the social scientists, will be happy with that, including the mathematicians. The humanists are going to be divided on it. And the arts people are going to have a whole lot of trouble with it. Knowledge being the basis of, in other words, they're going to say that music is not really about knowledge or how you handle knowledge. Now, what they come up with in the end is going to be something that you probably wouldn't feel comfortable with. When I say you, I mean scientists and engineers and, you know, but they are not going, they're going to say that this whole business of knowledge is overworked. There are other things that we do with our minds other than produce knowledge. Because, and what they'll say is that our capacities for learning include the cognition, okay, which is our underlying ability for knowledge, gaining knowledge and making knowledge statements and justifying knowledge statements. But what will happen before you're done is that the scientists, the mathematicians, half the engineering scholars, but not all of them, are going to say, well, that the cognition is what separates the human being from the beast. Right? Half of the humanists are going to say, go back to the psychologists and say, well, look, there's such a thing called the affect, and out of that is where we get love and all of these other things, and that's what separates man from beast. Go ahead.
This is all relating to knowledge because you're saying that it's kind of fuzzy and it's not as good.
No, I'm not saying anything. I'm interrogating. I haven't taken a stand yet. I will take a stand Thursday. I'm getting you ready for my stand. It looks like we're not going to have a whole lot of time for me to finish it today. Let me tell you what. Why don't, I don't know. You can sit, but you're doing so well.
Well, I would like to flesh out our definition a little bit more.
Okay, here's what I want to say. Here's what I want to say. I'll tell you, why don't you sit at the edge of the table? You may have to go back to the board. No, go ahead. Do what you want to do. Okay. Here's what I want to say. All right. I want to say that there are 4 learning capacities. Now, I have invented none of this. And one is our capacity to make knowledge statements and justify them. And we talked about a knowledge statement, what it looks like. We got another 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Okay. And we talked about rational knowledge and logic. We talked about empirical knowledge and facts. All right. We have another capacity called the affect. And that capacity enables us to make value judgments and to justify them. We not only say that water is a liquid, we are also able to say something very different. Water is good. And when I say water is good, now here's where Bernard Gert would get into discussion. He's going to say that's a knowledge statement. And most people will say that's not a knowledge statement. Got nothing to do with logic. Got nothing to do with the... Well, it has something indirectly to do with an empirical test. But that's not the end. Okay, the end is feeling good. All right. Okay. There's another one. The other two, I said there were 4. The other 2 go together. I'm going to go through this on Thursday, but I'm going to use the next 5 minutes to get you started because I want you to think about this. There is such a thing called a commitment pathway. I might have mentioned it before, but and the commitment pathway is from wishes to wants to intentions to action. And you get from a wish to a want with hope. So you may wish for $100 million. You start wanting it when you see some possibility of it, when you got some hope of getting it. You go from wants to intentions with self-esteem. In other words, you may want $100 million, but unless you think that you have the ability to get it, you won't have the intentions to get it. You'll just sit back in pain of wants without intentions. Okay? And then to get from intentions to action is what we call the will. Right? And this pathway is just as important in life as knowledge and values. As a matter of fact, if you read the German scholars, they will say, this is more important than knowledge and values. And their starting point for saying that is, if you deprive me of knowledge, and if I have some conflicting values, I can still make it in the world if I can prosecute this commitment pathway to having my way. All right. Now, when you devote scholarship to this commitment pathway, there's a word that nobody agrees on, but everybody will see the point in saying that great scholarship devoted to the part of this pathway from wishes to wants to intentions, we can call praxis, Praxis. There are other words, and then most people have no word for it. All right? And this part, from intentions to action, is called practice, and few people will disagree with the use of that word from going from intentions to action. Okay. All right. And what I want to say then is that underlying praxis is a term. I'll give you another term. Just like we have the cognition, called the conation. And underlying all of this practice is what you call psychomotor skill. Psychomotor skill is informed by praxis. It's a term used to include all of these things here. The will, self-esteem, hope. Okay. I'll lay it out more in a chart, I guess, better than today. But we've got no more minutes left. Let me go over time, about 30 seconds maybe. Let me just say that if you find science, the sciences, and mathematics in the cognitive area with the production of knowledge, and if you say that ethics and the humanities are in the values area with the affect, you'll find engineering and the performing arts over here. I'll have a better definition of the learner disciplines, but you'll be surprised, Ms. Bethke, that it'll look a whole lot like that. But it'll use this structure to get it. Thank you.